Please be seated.
Your Honour, Commissioners, this is the Royal Commission's 54th case study. This public hearing will... You say, both of you in your statement, that the Jehovah's Witnesses teach that child sexual abuse is an abhorrent sin. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct.
Right. And it's that teaching of the Jehovah's Witnesses that you rely on as an important element of your strategy to make the organisation a child-safe organisation. Is that right?
That and making sure that we conform with whatever legal requirements there are. We've taken the recommendations of the Royal Commission seriously.
Mr. Spinks, I said it's an important element. And what I'm saying is one of the things you say with regard to what you do to make your organisation child safe is that you teach Jehovah's Witnesses that child sexual abuse is an abhorrent sin. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. And of course, just what child sexual abuse is in the eyes and in the teaching of the organisation is therefore important. Do you accept that?
Yes.
And to the Royal Commission, child sexual abuse includes sexual or sexualised activity by an adult with anyone under the age of consent. Do you accept that?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to refer you to the letter to elders at tab 7 and seek your clarification with regard to something. In particular, if on page 2 you would look at paragraph 10, which is headed Congregation Considerations, and you'll see some distinctions are drawn. And in particular, the sentence I want to ask you about is the last sentence, but by all means read the whole lot. And the last sentence says, rather, this is in relation to what is child sexual abuse, we are referring to an adult guilty of sexually abusing a minor who is a young child. I don't think there's any question about that. And it goes on, or an adult guilty of sexual involvement with a minor who is approaching adulthood but was not a willing participant. Now, the question there is really this. This seems to be saying that within the eyes of the organisation and teaching of the organisation, a minor consenting to sexual involvement with an adult, a more mature minor, or as it's put here, a minor who is approaching adulthood, is not regarded as child sexual abuse.
No, that's not correct. That's not the intent of that, and if I could briefly explain.
Yes, so what I'm getting at is to understand the organisation's teaching or understanding as to where the line is drawn with regard to looking at the question of age or majority, where the line is drawn with regard to what is child sexual abuse.
I think if you go back to earlier in the paragraph, if I could, to give that context, and remembering that this is in addition to whatever legal implication. This is a congregation consideration. It says, when discussing child sexual abuse from a congregation standpoint, we're not discussing a situation in which a minor who is a willing participant and who is approaching adulthood is involved in sexual activity with an adult who is a few years older than the minor. So while that's a broad expression, our experience has been, for example, where we have seen it as child sexual abuse. One of the reports that we provided to the Royal Commission, where we viewed it that way, the elders have reported it that way, but the authorities don't necessarily view it that way, where the age gap is close. So that's not to be interpreted to say if the minor is willing. There are situations where, for example, a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old may have a consensual relationship. Now, there may be an implication under law, there may not. The same with the congregation. With these close ages and consensual, or was the age gap such that there's either a legal implication or a congregation implication?
So basically you're saying is that final sentence must be read as qualified by the first sentence. It's talking about two people relatively close in age.
Correct.
Right.
What is understood by a participant who is approaching adulthood? What does that mean?
For example, Your Honour, there may be a 16-year-old whose age of consent, and we're not, while we promote high moral standards, we're not so naive as to think that 16 and 18-year-olds aren't having sex. So we appreciate that there are circumstances where you've got two consenting people. One is technically by law an adult, one is approaching adulthood. So it's in that context.
Well, again, ask you, what do you understand to be someone approaching adulthood?
That was the example I used, Your Honour, where...
16-year-old?
Well, not necessarily.
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Well, I think the law is probably clear to us on that. For example, a 16-year-old may be able to consent. And so, again, if it was a 16 and an 18-year-old, we are not talking about here young teenagers with adults. We're talking about where there's a similar age.
I understand what you're talking about. I'm still trying to find out what you understand to be a participant approaching adulthood.
It would always be someone of a close age to 18, Your Honour. That's our understanding. You know, that's how we view it, taking into account the whatever legal implications there are too.
So it wouldn't include a 16-year-old in your understanding?
I did mention the example that the law would permit a 16-year-old in some states to have sex with an 18-year-old. We're not going to necessarily view it differently if they're of if it's a consensual relationship between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old.
Well, let's test it further. What about a 15-year-old?
I think in most cases the law would have an implication there as well that we would take into account. And each situation, we would get legal advice, but also make a determination, is this two young people of a similar age that have a consensual relationship, or is one using his, for example, authority or older age to take advantage of the younger person?
Well, the difficulty, Mr. Spence, that you face, isn't it, is that according to your teachings, the Bible doesn't specify an age as to when one reaches adulthood.
That's correct.
And I suppose in ancient times, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, it may have been at the time that the scriptures were written that someone in modern times would be regarded as very young, like a 13, 14-year-old might be able to marry. Would that be right?
Certainly not in the Bible. Thank you for... I appreciate that is the case in some cultures, but the Bible teaches very clearly that it would be someone who's past youth. But your point is taken that there's no strict rule in the scriptures.
Well, but that leaves us to the question of when is past youth?
I probably am not understanding your question. I don't want to be evasive because, again, we've had, and I'll be very happy to provide the details of this to the Commission, we've had situations recently because of our heightened sense of awareness of these issues where the elders have taken a young couple, one recently in Victoria where the girl was 15 and the young man was in his early 20s. They're from a culture outside Australia, courting young. They were obligated under law to go to the police. The elders went with the family to interpret, and the police said in that instance that they didn't view it as a sexual assault of the minor. So there are complications. From a congregation point of view, we probably have a stricter view than the law.
Mr. Spence, I don't want to spend time on it. The simple point is this, is the law, perhaps for reasons of pragmatism as much as anything else, and draws clear lines between when one can consent and when one can't consent legally to sexual intercourse, whereas the Jehovah's Witnesses don't. And would it not make your approach to things a lot easier and a lot clearer if you just followed the clear lines of the law in relation to this?
That's a complete misunderstanding. I apologise, Mr. Stewart. This is a secondary consideration to the law. Jehovah's Witnesses will always abide by the law. So this expression relates to where the law doesn't have an implication. The congregation may still view it as child sexual abuse or not, but it's always secondary to the law. So I can't see a situation where that would occur.